Hello, my name is Mark, and I thank you so much for coming by today. One of the things I love about art is just how much fun I have with it. Whether it's painting, drawing, or just assembling paper, whatever, I just love having fun with art. In fact, I love having fun with all kinds of things. Even this is the giant brain. This is a giant brain stress ball that I received as a gift this year. As you can see, it's just lots of fun. And if you know me and you know my history, then you know that this has a multi-level of humor to it. So I really love this thing, and it gives me a lot of stress relief too, as much as I have fun with it. But the question of the day is, what happens when art is not so much fun anymore? When you're struggling with art, when art is just something that you used to turn to for just to immerse in, to meditate, to relieve, or just to have fun with, and suddenly it's the thing that's causing you stress, or it's something that's giving you a challenge in your life that you didn't expect. Well, let's talk about this because it's a subject I've found a lot of people deal with, including myself, and I'll share my experiences with you and maybe some ways to combat when art is no longer a fun thing for you. So let's talk about this and more, and come on along.
There's an old saying that too much of anything may not be such a good thing. And while this may not be true for all things, it can certainly be true for most things. For me, I love to eat candy, especially Swedish fish. But for my diet, I've learned that eating too many sweets is simply not a good thing. The same thing can be said for exercise. I enjoy going to the gym and spending time keeping healthy. But going to the gym too much can be exhausting, overexerting, and it takes time away from doing other things that I want to do. But of course, if I stop going to the gym, I start falling back into old habits which make me feel unhealthy. So there's another old saying, which is everything in moderation. I've heard this for years and always thought it was good advice, so I followed it. Unfortunately, I learned the term moderation is just a clever way of saying, go ahead, it's okay. The reality is that doing anything in moderation still gives us permission to indulge in bad habits, and it can lead to compulsive or excessive behaviors if we're not very careful. So, what about when it's something that we're passionate about, or something that just makes us happy? Can it be a bad thing to immerse in something which provides a sense of joy and well-being? Well, the short answer is yes, it actually can be a bad thing, and that's the point of today's discussion. When overindulging in our creativity can have a dramatic negative effect on our creative spirit. Like I said, for me, Swedish fish can be my worst enemy, even in moderation. I can say the same thing about ice cream and chocolate chip cookies. There were times in my life when these kind of foods were my go-to way to feel good. Eating junk food and not thinking about my diet became a small problem for me, and I paid the price with weight gain and just feeling awful. Then, after many years, I finally learned to apply discipline and taught myself to eat right. I'm definitely not in perfect shape and I'm not at my peak, but I do feel really good about my health nowadays. While those poor decisions felt good back in the moment, I always ended up feeling terrible later. So now, my good decisions feel even better in the moment, and I always end up feeling so much healthier later. But it wasn't easy. It took a long time to force myself to really look at what I was eating, when I was eating, and how I was eating. With discipline and education, I started slow and built up to a diet and routine that worked for me. I immersed into intermittent fasting, which is all about when you eat, and I coupled that with what I was eating, and I saw results very quickly. It had everything to do with how my eating was affecting my health. I don't typically eat before noontime, and then I try to eat small amounts of healthy foods until dinner time when I eat whatever I like. Instead of rich desserts at the end of the day, I try to replace that with fruit, which has the sugar that my body craves. Again, I'm not perfect, so of course I indulge in some Swedish fish or a cookie every now and then. I mean, life is too short to pass up on all the sweet stuff all the time. But I'm not consuming these sweets in the same quantities, not nearly the same quantities that I used to, and that's had a huge difference for me. So, what does all this have to do with art? Well, if we replace the word diet with the word art, the two can be interrelated. In the past year, making poor decisions with my diet led me to feeling poorly about my physical self. Well, I could also say that in the past year, making poor decisions with my art led me to feeling poorly about my creative self as well. In the way that eating junk food was not respecting my body, the poor habits I developed with my art were not respecting my creative spirit. I was rushing my artwork, and I didn't spend the quality time planning things out, and I worked at times that were outside my comfort zone. For example, starting a drawing by going right into the inking stage first instead of laying out a thoughtful sketch. Or not developing a clear concept for a piece and just forcing out something that was random or cliché. And the worst was coming home after working all day and then trying to be creative after hours in the office when I was tired and I should be resting. Those bad habits had a detrimental effect on how I created my art and led to work that I just wasn't happy with. Frustration, doubt, and feeling badly about my own creativity had become my new routine. Oddly enough, it felt very familiar to the routine I had with my diet. Frustration, doubt, and feeling badly about my health had become my new routine. Another bad habit I had gotten myself into was creating art for other people. You might think, but how can creating art for other people be bad? Well, it's one thing if we're being paid to create art for others, but it's a very different thing if we're not being paid. And I'm talking specifically about social media. Something I never used to ask myself was, why am I making all this art for social media? I mean, what's the real reason so many artists post their work online for free and just give it away? Is it to find work or make money? Is it to gain exposure and get their name out there? Or is it to be recognized as an artist in a larger community? It could be that it's just to have a place to post what we do where someone else might enjoy it. But then again, maybe there's more to it than that. Maybe there's a psychology behind it, a desperate need to prove ourselves, a need for validation, or a need to have a safe repository to harvest supportive reactions from other people. And maybe it's even deeper than that, a need to fulfill some part of our life that's just not being satisfied somewhere else. I can't speak to what motivates other people, I can only speak for myself. And for me, I can very honestly admit that posting work online gives me a rush. It's the recognition, the engagement with other people, and the feeling that yes, I am part of a supportive community. It feels good to have my work validated by other artists. It feels good when someone clicks like or leaves a comment. And for most of us, posting online tickles our creative spirit and provides comfort in knowing that our creative self is doing okay. It's that momentary spotlight that allows us to shine brightly even just for a couple of days. It's that dopamine hit to the brain that makes us feel excited to see a response to something that we've put out into the universe. The act of contribution gives us a rare and valuable sense of worth and well-being. But as it is with social media, that spark of joy soon fizzles out and our last post is quickly forgotten. Does this sound familiar? I know about this and I've been studying it for the past year with regard to my own work. It happened to me with YouTube. I was posting videos on a regular basis, keeping up with the demand of the algorithm to create fresh new content. After a few years, I started realizing that the process was starting to take a downward toll and feel like work. The negative feedback I would get from strangers, trolls trying to push buttons and get reactions, and people with no experience in art constantly criticizing or pointing out flaws was just getting to be too much. I had to laugh when one of my own songs that I wrote and recorded was flagged for copyright infringement. It started to wear on me to the point where I said, no more. Creating content for YouTube and social media felt like consuming too much junk food, and it made me feel unhealthy. Don't get me wrong, I loved that my content was entertaining and maybe even useful for some people. I'm glad I explored the opportunity and considered it a great experience. But again, I was not helping myself to be healthy. Spending countless hours drafting a script, recording audio and video, and editing everything became daunting. I stopped creating art for myself and was only creating visuals to fit that week's narrative. This went against the promise that I made to myself when I first started creating YouTube content. I said if it ever starts to feel like a job, then it's time to step away. In other words, when you take the fun out of a task, it becomes a chore. So, about a year ago, I felt like I was in an unwanted commitment. I felt like I was stuck in a job that I didn't like. To be true to myself, I decided to take a break. At the same time, the Inktober challenge was coming back around again. People reached out to me on social media asking, "Are you going to participate in Inktober?" Well, after 7 years of doing the challenge, I began to feel the same way, like it was work. I asked myself, exactly who am I doing this challenge for? I mean, it seemed like the real benefit was for everyone but me. Friends and family and all the people on social media enjoyed seeing new, unique drawings from me every day during Inktober. But people compared my work to other artists, they offered unwanted critiques of my work, and some made suggestions about what I could have done better. So what benefit was there for me in creating all that work with no compensation and no reward at the end except unsolicited feedback? It goes back to the validation and recognition needs we get from social media. So I decided to give up the late nights, the stress, the anxiety, and the pressure to come up with something new every day for Inktober because, well, it just wasn't fun anymore. It was hard at first. I had programmed myself to do that challenge every year. I had become dependent on the feedback of others, good or bad, to justify why I kept doing the challenge. But after the first few days of letting go of Inktober, I started to feel unbelievably liberated. I realized that Instagram and Facebook were also feeling like work, so I stopped posting as frequently there as well. I tried TikTok, but that was a chore that I just didn't need, so I pretty much stopped altogether. In the end, all the energy spent creating, editing, posting, and waiting for feedback was simply working completely against my own best interests. Unfortunately, there was a price for all this. I found that my art had taken a big hit and had become sterile, generic, and boring. I stopped taking risks and I hid within the security of my comfort zone. I began the process of rinse and repeat creativity, drawing the same things over and over, and again, it just wasn't fun anymore. It took a long time, but I had to break the bad habits of my creativity and retool my own way of thinking to fit my needs. Not the needs of an algorithm, a platform, or even the viewers who wrote to say, "Mark, I miss seeing your videos." It was time for me to reclaim my creative spirit that I had spent my whole life nurturing. Over the past year, I created a fraction of the work that I'd done in the past. I spent less time in my studio than ever before and watched all my precious art supplies collect dust. Even though I was still fully creative, my passion went into other things. And I started working at my own pace and for my own enjoyment. I immersed deeply into digital art with new applications like Adobe Fresco, Animate, Firefly, and Midjourney. I still posted online, but to my own frequency and under my terms and conditions. This hiatus got me to really question my work and my process. It was strange, but it felt very much like when I began to question my eating habits. I went through some older videos that I'd made, and one stood out to me: the benefits of unlearning. If you're interested in that video, I'll put a link in the description below so you can check it out. What I took away from that video was that I needed to change my creative discipline and how I was creating work. Going back to diet and exercise, I began to look at what I was creating, when I was being creative, and where my routine could be adjusted. In the past year, I understood that I wasn't having fun with my art, and it was a labor for me. I spoke to other creative people who all had similar experiences. One friend said that after COVID, it was harder to immerse in creative work and to find jobs that paid well enough to take on. They admitted that their creative output had significantly decreased. Many of us chose to pull out of our creative careers and take on new roles outside the creative field to ensure our financial security. Technology has become more accessible, and non-creative people are now looking to find work in the creative field. The creative job market is oversaturated, and a lot of seasoned professionals are turning to alternative ways to make a living. A good example of this was an old neighbor of mine who was a stay-at-home parent. I ran into them one day, and they told me they had just taken a class learning to use AI software and had also just landed a freelance job with a company creating AI backgrounds for their product photographs. Now, this neighbor had zero experience in the creative field, yet they were now getting work using AI software in the creative field. And this AI software is a brand new avenue that's actually having detrimental effects on the livelihoods of creative people. In fact, Adobe lost one of their key team members in the past year. Kyle T. Webster, a well-known designer, left Adobe abruptly to work for their biggest competitor, Procreate, after being with Adobe for years. He stated that a big reason that he left was Adobe's integration of AI into all their software applications. So, if you use Photoshop or Illustrator, then you likely may have seen the new contextual menu or generative fill features. Kyle T. Webster sounded distraught knowing that his company was literally putting their own customer base out of work. I applaud the position he took, and it inspired me to look at my own reasons for being creative. Again, what I'm creating, when I'm creating, and why I'm creating too. Because something I never thought about before is the idea that my work might just inspire or motivate someone else, just one other person, maybe a younger artist, to indulge and immerse in their own creativity. And that could potentially promote the need and demand for real art created by real people. We're going to see just how important this is over the next few years, too. We're all watching AI artists pop up all over social media. The results range from generic and disposable to weird and freaky to absolutely stunning and jaw-dropping. But the reality is that the people creating this AI content usually have little to no creative experience or skill. They've simply learned how to manipulate software to develop complex prompts to get results. In the past 2 years, I've been exploring AI software myself to learn how it works and how it might be of benefit for me. I admit, it's amazing technology, and to create unimaginable artwork in the blink of an eye is really impressive. Last year, I actually used AI software on a freelance project, and my client was blown away at how fast the turnaround time was and how the images looked. I actually felt a little guilty getting paid for work that took me less time to create than paying a bill online. But that's the industry right now. I did have a sense that I was betraying my own creative morals using AI software, but I came to terms with the idea that it's just another tool in the toolbox. The thing is, if a person is not very creative to start with, then the results of AI work are not going to be very good. However, if the person is creative, then the work they create using AI software is probably going to look really good. The creative field is being forced to make room for AI content creators whether we like it or not. And yes, some people are losing their jobs because of AI software. But just like when HTML or Flash came along, there's a whole new generation of people out there, both creative and non-creative, who are making a living from it. So in all, when we consider the labor of creating fresh new content, the hours spent developing it, and the frustration over how to leverage it in order to make a living, and with the rise of AI generative artwork in the market, it's no surprise that so many artists are simply not having fun creating their artwork these days. So how is it possible to not have fun creating artwork? I mean, isn't that the whole point of being creative? To have fun, to play, and to experiment? Well, when we're in that zone where our creativity flows steadily and naturally, we never question it. We move organically through our creative process with confidence and without hesitation. We literally lose ourselves in that creative process. It's that immersive meditation that I always talk about, when we get so deeply involved in a project that we tune out the rest of the world and focus solely on the connection we have with our creative spirit and our creative tools. It's an incredible experience that most artists are completely unaware they're even having, and which non-creatives can't even relate to. But over time, when that confidence begins to waver or we hesitate and question ourselves, that connection gets interrupted. That's when the zone we felt so good in becomes too small, confined, uncomfortable, and even unstable. But why does this happen? What can cause our positive creative flow to suddenly become negative and stuck in the mud? In my career and in my own experiences, I've seen a lot of reasons for this to happen. And it can cause a lot of frustration, anxiety, and even depression when our creativity begins to falter and work against us. Well, here are a few reasons why our creative process can sometimes stop being fun and actually become a detriment to our creative way of life. Number one, when our personal health and our well-being are off. When we get sick, we can't do much of anything, let alone be creative. But being physically sick is only one way our health can impact our creativity. When we're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, sad, or even melancholy, our creativity can seem a million miles away. The best thing to do when our personal health is off is to get rest, to focus on our well-being, and to work toward a place where we can access our creativity. It takes time though. My attitude is health first, then everything else after. Because let's face it, if we're not in a good place health-wise, it will be reflected in everything we try to create. Number two, when life gets in the way. This is when work, school, family, or our own personal commitments consume our time and take us away from what we want to do. This probably affects more artists than anything else. It's like a shoe rack that only holds a certain number of shoes. If we want to add a new pair of shoes, we have to move an old pair off the rack. It's about making space on the shoe rack. The same goes for our creative time. When it feels like life gets in the way of our creative time, we have to make space for that time. Whether getting up an hour earlier each day or staying up an hour later. Maybe we stop watching TV or scrolling on our phones at night and use that time instead for creativity. For me, I like planning my meals ahead of time. So, for example, I made chili on Saturday, and that's been our dinner for 4 nights. So for 4 nights, I got to spend the hour or two that I'd normally be in the kitchen in my studio working on a new project. With my exercise routine, I used to go to the gym every night. Now, to make room for creative time, I only go 3 or 4 nights and use the off nights for me time, my creative time. And like exercise, creative time is something we need to make time for. Creative time is exercise for the brain, and it's a workout for the creative spirit. Number 3, lack of improvement. One of the most common and frustrating things that will affect our positive creative attitude is not seeing an improvement in our work. Ironically, it happens to every single artist, especially for beginners and people coming back to their art after being away from it for a long time. Even though we devote our time practicing and creating new work, everything may start to look the same and would repeat the same patterns in each piece. Picasso was a big fan of changing his style whenever he felt he was stuck in one direction. He once said, "Nobody would pay attention if one always said the same thing, in the same words, and in the same tone of voice." To overcome our lack of improvement, we need to be honest with ourselves and see where our flaws are. We need to seek out and be open to constructive criticism. And we need to understand where we need to improve, like with anatomy, perspective, and value, and then immerse ourselves into those disciplines. It helps to refocus our creative energy on different projects and explore new mediums. Last year, I was feeling so stuck, I went out and I bought some model magic to play with. It was so fun to try something completely new and work in a way that I hadn't before. I made some little figurines, a couple of coasters, and a new holder for my paintbrushes. It was a great way to step away from what I was stuck in and try something fresh, even if it was as simple as model magic. And of course, stepping out of our own work and immersing into other people's work can always influence our style as well. There's nothing better than going to a gallery, picking up an old art book on our bookshelf, or even looking online at the work of others to inspire us and influence us to change our styles, to motivate us to create more, or just to get us to think about our work in a different way. Number 4, seeking perfection. Perfection is an unattainable state that if we choose to pursue, will make us go crazy. Because even in nature, the state of perfection simply does not exist. The idea that something could be completely free of flaws is not realistic. And that's what makes nature so fun as a subject, because it's all flaws and never has a single straight line. And with artwork created using AI technology, the results look almost too perfect. And that's where the flaw is with AI technology, that you can tell when something's been created with AI because it's just too slick and perfect looking. And funny enough, it's that kind of perfection that most artists don't strive for. We are not Rembrandt or Michelangelo, and we don't have the time to put into our work like they did. So our work is based on standards of perfection that we set on ourselves. And when that standard goes beyond or exceeds our skill level, then we get frustrated by our own results. When I designed the sets for musical theater, I had a saying, "Done is good." Because when I first got into that work, I used to get so hung up on the details that it took forever. I wanted each piece to be perfect. However, there was too much work to do to spend all day painting every single blade of grass on a backdrop. I learned over the years that when a piece was good enough to show the audience, then it was done. And again, done is good. No one in the audience cared about the blades of grass or the shingles on the roof or the stones in the wall. They weren't looking at the details. So as long as they could tell it was a blade of grass or a stone in the wall, they were happy, and so was I. The same approach is true in illustration, graphic design, and even painting murals. Embracing the idea that perfection does not exist can free us from being locked into unreasonable expectations. It gives us permission to create work at our exact skill level without worrying that it may not meet some arbitrary standard. Letting go and not seeking perfection in our work allows us for more freedom and more joy in the work that we can create. And it removes the restrictions, expectations, and the potential misery in the work that we can't create. Number 5, envy and jealousy. This is when we see the work of others and allow it to influence the joy and affection that we have for our own work. It's healthy to be competitively inspired by someone else's work. It incites us to be more vigilant and focused with our own work. Whether you're a visual artist, a performer, a chef, or an athlete, we all share a competitive spirit even if it's quiet. But when that competitive spirit rises above our creative spirit and we resent the other artist, our emotions can keep us from accessing the joy in being influenced by others. That's when envy and jealousy keep us from having fun with our own work. It's a kind of fear that threatens our security, but we don't know how to process it, so we become jealous. And jealousy is when we feel threatened by an outside influence. In a relationship, there's usually a third party involved. But with art, it's usually when another person is involved. Jealousy with creativity is that ominous competitive feeling we get when we think someone's better than us, or when someone else gets more attention than us and we don't think they necessarily deserve it. I admit it, it happens to me too, more than I care to tell you. When I see an amazing illustration in a magazine or in a gallery, or even in a post online, I can feel that mist of jealousy rising up. It's not that I don't like the work, it's that it makes me see the work that I haven't created or that I haven't created yet. I see the work that I should be doing and not recognizing the work that someone else has done and succeeded at. Jealousy leads to a downward spiral of negative thinking that can ruin the joy of seeing someone else's work by irrationally comparing it to our own work. For me, when envy and jealousy strike, I tend to critique other people's work and look for the flaws. I say things like, I don't know why they use those colors, or there's something off about this piece, but I don't know what it is. I can become churlish and sour, but only because I'm projecting my negative feelings for not having the drive to create the way someone else did. With envy, it's similar, but instead of being just negative, envy can be positive as well. What I mean is that envy can allow us to recognize something good and exhibit our appreciation for it. For example, when I see an illustration that is way beyond my skill level, and I know it, I feel envy. Not jealousy, envy. Because I can see how good it is, I can express how much I appreciate it, and I'm sincere with my compliments about the art and the artist. I'll say things like, wow, this is an artist who really understands watercolors, or that is so good, I can only wish to paint like that. But with both envy and jealousy, I allow myself to react to someone else's work personally. My competitive spirit overtakes my creative spirit and gets my heart pumping to respond with emotion. It's actually a very normal response, too, for most artists, and this reaction can help us grow if we acknowledge it. The best way to combat these negative competitive reactions and emotions is to either ignore them and walk away and remove ourselves from the opportunity to be jealous, or do what I call letting the other team win, even when the other team is completely unaware that we exist. The best way is to go back to our own space, create work that makes us happy, and just forget about how we felt when we were jealous. For this one, number 5, I could have called it comparing ourselves to others, because that's where envy and jealousy always seem to lead. If we stop comparing ourselves to others, we can release ourselves from the negative bind that holds us back and keeps us from moving forward with our own work. Simply put, we just need to let our feelings happen and then not react to them. It's like realizing someone's driving aggressively on the highway, cutting everyone off and weaving between cars. For me, I feel that frustration and annoyance, but if I can recognize how I feel and then not react, I'll be just fine. And hopefully, up ahead there's a police officer and that person gets pulled over. Recognizing that our feelings are real and embracing that they're negative, we can twist our thinking around so they inspire us and motivate us into positive creativity. Something I do when I'm browsing social media and I see new artwork that triggers my jealousy is I take a screenshot of that art with my phone. When someone's work grabs my attention and stirs my creative spirit, I'll take a screenshot of their work and save it in an album on my phone called Inspirations. Once I capture it, it's no longer a threat, so my jealousy quickly begins to change. I can look at the work later and study it to have a better understanding and relationship with it. I transform that jealousy into curiosity and the fear into understanding. I then allow it to inspire me and to motivate me into creating something new of my own. I use those captured screenshots all the time for reference, inspiration, or just for influence. Sometimes I like to recreate other people's art in my own style as well. For me, it's been an invaluable resource to help me quickly identify when I'm triggered by someone else's artwork, which I can then transform from negative feelings into a positive response. This allows me to remove the burden of envy or jealousy, approach the other artist with affection and support, and be a better artist where I can have more fun with my art instead of getting hung up on someone else's. Number 6, disinterest and burnout. Something that I've seen with students, online artists, and throughout my career is when people take on too much. I know because I'm guilty of it myself. I've seen influencers burn out from trying to desperately keep up with an abstract algorithm. I've seen students frantically trying to juggle their passion for art along with classwork, sports, extracurriculars, and even working a part-time job. And for some people, being a single parent means raising kids, getting them to school, buying groceries, doing the laundry, cooking, cleaning, the whole thing, and then trying to work full-time. It can be completely overwhelming, but then trying to find leisure time to draw or paint, forget about it. I knew a young mother who was incredibly skilled with Zentangle-style artwork, but because she was a single mom raising 3 kids, she felt she had no time to indulge her passion for drawing. So, I offered her an opportunity to meet up once a month for coffee at a local coffee shop. She agreed and was able to have someone watch her kids for 2 hours once a month, and we got together. We brought our paints and sketchbooks, and we enjoyed the most wonderful painting sessions while we chatted about life, our kids, and our goals. It was a fantastic way to support each other and find time to tap into our creativity where there was none before. We were both burned out from our day-to-day routines, which caused our disinterest in creating artwork. Something in our lives had to make way for all the other things we had to deal with. But finding that time to have coffee not only enriched our friendship, but it allowed us to both revive our interest and keep us excited about being creative. I had a high school student who was working on a graphic novel, but they were burning out from their schedule. Frustration and stress over studying for exams, sports, and dating was leading to their disinterest. We sat one day in class and I explained to them they needed to find somewhere in their schedule that would allow them to immerse in their work, even just for 30 minutes a day. I explained that this was not for fun, it was to work on their graphic novel. So we went over their schedule and found that during the day I had a prep period at the same time they had lunch. So I offered them an opportunity to bring their lunch to my classroom and spend their 40-minute lunch period on their work. Without hesitating, that student agreed and every day came to my class during lunch and dove right into their work. I saw a dramatic resurgence in their attitude, their enthusiasm, and their interest in their work. It was amazing to watch as that student couldn't wait for lunch every day. There's only one surefire way to prevent burnout, and that is to pace ourselves so the time we invest is not interrupted by outside influence or tasks. We absolutely must keep creating, even when we're in the thralls of burnout, because as soon as we put our work aside and think, I'll get to it later, or I don't have time right now, that will head us right into disinterest. And it's much harder to recover from disinterest than it is from burnout. Disinterest gives us permission to put off our interests and relies on excuses to not keep us from working. Burnout, on the other hand, is exhaustion that requires us to step away to recharge and refocus our energy and our mental capacity to get back into our work. There are no excuses with burnout, only the need to change our routine. There are times when life takes over and we can't ignore the reality that our precious creative time must be set aside. Family emergencies, health situations, school obligations, work obligations, or financial reasons. But the solution is to make a firm agreement with ourselves to come back to our creativity as soon as possible. When the emergencies or obligations are past, then we commit ourselves to reclaiming our time and our effort in our creative spirit. Sometimes letting go of the pressure to create can help free ourselves so we can fully focus on other demands that need our immediate attention. Like I said, number 1, health and well-being come before anything. And number 2, when life gets in the way, we have to find ways to fit our creativity into our routines. The alternative is that our creative spirit burns out and eventually fades away. And that should never be acceptable if we can help it. Number 7, being undervalued. When I began freelancing, I learned very quickly that clients were all about cutting costs and saving money. No matter how low my quote was, clients always came back with an even lower number, usually much lower. If I said $2,000 for a job, they'd say, all we can do is $1,000. If I quoted $4,000, they'd hem and haw and roll their eyes and try to lowball my quote. One client asked me, "What is it with you artist people? Why do you always think your work is worth so much?" They went on to say that artists overvalue their skills and that there's always 20 more artists out there who are willing to do the job for less. It was infuriating that my time and my skills, the years I spent developing those skills, were at the mercy of someone whose bottom line was to undermine me. The funny thing is, I understood it. But could you imagine going to your dentist and trying to lowball the price of dental work? Or debate your auto mechanic that $500 is too much and you only want to pay $200? They would probably laugh and show you the door. Fortunately, as my business grew, I could be more selective about whom I worked with, only taking on clients who respected my time and my work. But value isn't just about money. Value is also about how people respond to and appreciate our artwork as well. It's a humbling conclusion when an audience doesn't take an interest in what we do. Imagine going to the theater and for the final bow at the end of the show, no one claps. That would be a devastating blow to the cast and crew. This kind of devalue can be a major contributor to burnout, disinterest, and even giving up creating art altogether. Whether showing our work in a gallery or exhibition, showing our work to a potential client, or even posting our work online, if the response is negative, we can react. We can engage the audience to find out why it was received negatively. However, when there's no response, when people don't value our work enough to even respond, that can be truly just as devastating. I know for me, when I post one of my videos on Facebook and not a single friend comments or even likes it, it's a real blow to my ego, especially when another friend posts a video of a band they went to see and everyone loves it and comments on it. Social media can make an artist feel invisible. When we post on a regular basis, friends and followers can get tired of seeing the same work and just dismiss it. Despite the hours we spend on our projects, it's easy for people to stop, look, and walk away without a single word. Feeling like no one appreciates or values what we do creatively can be frustrating and disheartening. It can affect us even more when there's money involved. Recently, a person I used to go to church with who moved out of state contacted me about an illustration project. They said it would be perfect for me, so we discussed it, and I was excited to get into the project. But when I sent them a quote of how much it would cost, the reaction was surprising. They were confused and said they were disappointed. They didn't realize I was going to charge them. After all, we were friends, right? They literally said, "I just thought it would be a fun project for you, and it would be really great exposure for you." They were unaware that I would expect to get paid for the project, which still blows me away. It was a long time since I'd heard those comments about exposure and it'll be good for your portfolio, but I immediately declined the project, shaking my head, and I hung up the phone. The idea that a friend would have such little value in me, my work, and my time made me a little sad. But it was a good reminder that this is how a lot of non-artists view creative people. Value is a two-way street. With selling our work, there has to be a mutual respect and appreciation between us and the client. Without it, then one party will walk away feeling slighted or undervalued. With posting our work on social media, we have to provide feedback for others in order to receive it. If all we do is post our work and expect people to leave feedback, then people will get bored and stop following. However, if we're able to provide thoughtful, supportive feedback to others, then they will provide the same for us. If we're still not being valued online, then perhaps we're presenting to the wrong audience. It's important to examine who we're posting for, and if it is the wrong audience, then it's time to seek out a new audience. Finding like-minded artists or friends will yield more value to us and our work than people with no connection at all. Unfortunately, that's what happens when I post my videos on Facebook. Most of my friends and family are simply not interested to learn about art or creativity. They don't respond because they have no connection and nothing really to contribute. If I post a photo of my kids or myself doing something fun and relatable, then I get lots of feedback on Facebook. Something I used to teach is that persistence is the key to the door to being recognized, and sincerity is the welcome mat to being appreciated. Number 8, creative blocks. Whenever a lack of motivation meets a drought of inspiration, we get creative blocks. Let me say that again. Whenever a lack of motivation meets a drought of inspiration, we get creative blocks. So let's start with, what is creativity anyway? Creativity is a complex interplay between precise, controlled thinking and free-spirited, spontaneous thinking. In other words, it's when our controlled thinking is in perfect harmony with our spontaneous thinking. When we move through life without major concerns or distractions, then we're usually able to access that interplay and express our thinking in creative ways. However, when we feel deep concern or worry about things in life, or experience major distractions, then this can disrupt that interplay and throw our thinking off balance, both the controlled thinking and the spontaneous thinking. When we focus too hard to control things in our life, especially when they're out of our control, it can detract from our spontaneity. The result is, it limits us from our free play sandbox approach to problem solving, and accessing that interplay becomes really difficult. So instead, the more we try to force access, the more it's denied. It's like a dam that has been built on our stream of consciousness that blocks our free-flowing ideas and expressions. It's what we call a creative block, and it happens to just about every creative person at some point. There's a huge range of reasons why this happens, from a change in seasons to money issues, the monotony of a daily grind, or even being emotionally compromised. If we do a search on Google or YouTube on how to clear a creative block, you'll find tons of content. But it's only when you're in a creative block do you realize there's no switch that turns it off. There's no video or website that can help someone clear a creative block when they're in the middle of one. And while there's a lot of advice out there, there are only 2 true ways to get out of a creative block. You either wait it out or you work it out. Waiting it out means finding other non-creative interests to indulge your controlled thinking. For me, I enjoy working in my yard, playing my guitar, or just getting outside and being part of nature. Like the dam on the river, over time, the block will become dislodged and the stream will start flowing again. Some people like to work it out and force their controlled thinking to give way to spontaneous thinking. This means instead of slowly dislodging the dam on the stream of consciousness, they'll go at that dam with full force like a wrecking ball. Doing color swatches, practicing foundation level exercises like perspective or value, creating sketch patterns, or even organizing our art supplies can be great ways of working it out. The idea is to work out the block until it comes loose, allowing that complex interplay to be like a child visiting a new playground. One common thing with creative blocks is that they all take time. Some take more than others, but eventually they will come undone. Only in the rarest cases have I ever heard of a creative block lasting more than a few weeks or having a long-lasting, long-term effect on an artist. Number 9, no desire to explore. Whether we work traditionally or digitally, if we don't explore new techniques, styles, and mediums, then we'll get caught in the rinse and repeat cycle of creating the same work over and over. Work with no enthusiasm, no character, no personality, and no life. If there's no interest in growing or expanding our skills, then that will communicate to our audience. A lack of interest to explore new things will usually lead to one result: boredom. I used to teach my students that boredom is a lack of imagination. But what boredom really is the absence of desire in finding creative opportunities. If we deny ourselves the interest to explore, we deny ourselves the opportunities to grow, learn, and experience new things. And without those, our work will lack depth, range, expression, and the ability to communicate. There was once a man who traveled the world, yet he never left his home. All the experiences he had were from the books he read, the most wonderful, fantastic stories from all over. But as much as he felt as though he had been around the world, he actually knew very little of what the world was really like. He never knew what French food tasted like, he never knew what the sound of the ocean was like, and he never knew anything about falling in love. He only knew what other people wrote about these things. Had the man left his home and stepped out of his comfort zone? He might have learned all about these things from his own experiences. The same is true for artists. If we don't explore new styles, mediums, and techniques, if we don't examine the work of other artists, cultures, and time periods, if we don't embrace new opportunities to challenge our creative skills and take risks, then we'll never be able to experience them for ourselves and we'll watch others benefit instead. We forfeit the opportunities to grow and create a new range of our own work that is fresh and unique, which could actually inspire a whole new audience to explore their creativity as well. I've seen this with younger artists who only choose to work with digital media. They lack the experience working in traditional media, favoring the comfort and ease of a digital canvas and brush. But working digitally can sometimes rob us of the tactile experience we need to understand the mediums we work in. I can create a digital watercolor painting that looks like a real watercolor painting. However, a large part of the experience of painting in watercolor is lost when I create it digitally. Knowing how to manipulate and control the medium is key to the success of the work. But if I had no interest in using real watercolors and only painted digital watercolor, I'd have no idea about that. And after a few digital watercolor paintings, I'd probably become bored because I can only do so much with it. And again, that would communicate to our audience, and my work might be seen by the audience as boring. For artists who can't or won't shift gears and explore new creative techniques, the process can become anything but fun. It can become tedious and repetitive. For artists who follow the rinse and repeat approach, their work becomes safe, predictable, and unfortunately, cliché. It's important for all artists to constantly be seeking out new ways to develop their skills. When I was teaching art, I had a student who loved to draw anime-style characters on their iPad. They had used ballpoint pens and micron pens, but they'd never used a dip pen with real ink before. So I introduced them to dip pens and challenged them to see what they could do. While that student was excited and thrilled to try real dip pens and ink for the first time, they quickly realized that without an undo button or an eraser tool, real pen and ink was very difficult to control. Eventually, with some basic instruction, they were able to explore the new medium and create sketches that were similar to what they could create on the iPad. Taking an interest in exploring new ways of doing things only serves to enhance what we already know. Of course, for me, I know how much I could benefit from an undo button when I paint with real watercolors. Finally, number 10, laziness. Maybe the most obvious reason that creating art might lose its appeal or stop being fun altogether is just simple laziness. How many times have we spent an hour scrolling on our phones only to realize just how lazy we're being? No productivity, no movement, no interactions, just scrolling. We watch and process and analyze, yet our reaction doesn't actually yield any action at all. Sure, we might become emotional at a post or video, like laughing, being disgusted, or even getting angry, but we remain in the same spot, static, unmoving, and physically unchanged. Scrolling takes absolutely zero effort and provides us with absolutely zero in return beyond a little entertainment. So, in life, it's safe to assume that zero effort will yield zero return. And that's the thing about being creative, is that it takes effort. My formula for success is time plus energy plus effort equals success. And that success can be measured by education, growth, experience, and productivity. It takes time to create. Finding time outside of work or school, setting up our space, getting our supplies ready, and so on. It takes energy to put motivation into action, which will get our blood pumping and our brain in a creative mode, and it takes effort to pick up that pen or move that brush across the canvas. The success is found in learning how to use our tools better, explore new opportunities, and experience the tactile sensations of our materials. The success is also in that moment in our life when we can fully immerse into our creative self and tune out everything around us. It's an amazing feeling when we're in that immersive state and so rewarding when we finally come out. There's a word that we don't often associate with art or creativity, the word fortitude. Fortitude is the mental and emotional strength we find within our spirit to forge ahead through the challenges that lie in front of us. Fortitude is what helps us cut through the weeds of a creative block and forge a path through the brambles of fear and doubt. We need that fortitude to help us commit to putting our time to good use, our energy into our work, and our effort into making it work for us. If we don't commit ourselves to that time, energy, and effort, and only indulge in trivial, useless, and lazy pursuits, then we adopt the negative philosophy that it's okay to put off important things until later. There's an old saying, don't put off later what you can do right now, and it's so true. Procrastination, laziness, and sloth. These are all words for dismissing time, energy, and effort in favor of relaxation, a quick fix, easiness, or fun. These words also allow us to shift the blame for our lack of success onto someone or something else. You may hear someone say, "I didn't get the job interview because they never emailed me back." A statement like this shifts the blame for not getting a job interview from us to the employer, as though it were their fault for not contacting us. It's up to us to be vigilant in following up on our communications, especially when we want something from someone else. Another word that I like to apply here is persistence. Persistence is when we do something and encounter a difficulty, an obstacle, or opposition, yet despite those, we keep pushing through it and maintain our determination to achieve our success. Back when my kids were young, I needed a job that was close to home. I found the perfect design job with a small agency just 20 minutes away. They were looking for a mid-level designer, so I applied for the job online. Well, I didn't hear back from them right away, so I assumed that my experience working for large companies and being an art director probably put them off. So, I found the name of the agency's art director on their website and emailed them about the job. My email was professional and polite, and I expressed my sincere interest in the job. Finally, after a few weeks, they replied. They said, "Thank you for your interest, but we're going to continue our search to fill the role." Well, this ticked me right off, because I had put a lot of time, energy, and effort into crafting my resume, updating my portfolio, and contacting this company. I was not about to be turned away without at least a conversation about why I wasn't being considered. So I went back to their website, found the owner's email address, and emailed the owner. The short version of the story is that the owner and I ended up talking on the phone for over an hour, sharing stories about the design industry, and they invited me to come in for an interview. As I was about to leave from that interview, they stopped me in the hallway and offered me the job right there. I worked for that agency for several years, and one day when I spoke with the art director, they told me that they didn't like when I went over their head to talk to the owner. Still, during the interview, it had become clear that I was qualified for the job and worth interviewing after all. It was my persistence that got that job, my unwillingness to accept no as an answer before even being interviewed. For me, I had nothing to lose by being persistent, and it paid off. It was a bold move to go over someone's head, but fortunately, it was worth it. And funny enough, we're still friends even today. The point is, if there's a job to be done, there must be action in order to do it. And action is the process of putting something into motion that will produce a reaction or consequence. for better or for worse. As we've all heard, for every action, there is a reaction. If you break an egg to make an omelet, there are several things that may happen. 1. You get eggshell in your omelet. 2. You spill the egg all over the counter. Or 3. You succeed and you make a delicious breakfast. However, it could also be said that for every inaction, there is a reaction as well. If you need to make an omelet but choose to sit on the couch watching television, several things may happen. 1. Your hunger increases and you end up getting something else to eat that's faster and much less healthy. 2. You end up rushing and making a big mess or even burning yourself or the meal. Or 3. You fail and have nothing to eat. For me, the worst part of laziness and procrastination is that we usually have to do the tasks anyway, like changing the sheets on a bed. Nobody likes this chore, but it has to be done. So we can either get out of bed, pull all the sheets off and toss them in the washing machine and dryer, or put it off until the sheets become so dirty and smelly they're unhealthy to sleep on. I've had experiences when I'll go to bed and find that the sheets were still in the laundry. I put off making the bed when I had the chance during the day, so now I have to make the bed at 11 o'clock at night when I'm tired. Laziness is a bad habit that needs to be forced out. We need to listen to that little voice inside us that tells us to get up or to get off the phone. We need to act quickly and without hesitation to get things done. With our artwork, laziness can ruin our paintbrushes, diminish our passion and desire to create, and forfeit opportunities to experience joy. Because if there's no joy in our work, then creating art will never be fun. And if there's no fun in creating artwork, then there's no point. So that's a lot of information to talk about in one video. So to summarize it all, here's a bullet point version of how to keep art fun or to bring the fun back into your art. Number 1, focus on the process. Remind yourself that art is about the journey, not just the final product. 2, experiment and play. Try new mediums, styles, and techniques to keep things fresh. 3, set realistic goals. Focus on personal growth and your own happiness in creating art rather than the external validation from other people. 4, practice self-compassion. Accept that not every piece we create will be perfect and celebrate our progress and successes, however large or small. 5, be part of a community. Seek out local groups or classes to connect with other artists and share ideas to support and encourage each other. Number 6, consume inspiration. Expose yourself to all kinds of art, music, theater, and writing. The more we consume other people's creativity, the more it will motivate us to create our own. And number 7, take a break. When the joy in the things we love to do start to become uncomfortable like a chore or feel like pressure, it's important to step away to refresh our perspective and see things more clearly with a fresh viewpoint. And that goes for anything. John Lennon once sang, "If it don't feel right, you don't have to do it. Just leave a message on the phone and tell them to screw it. 'Cause after all's been said and done, you can't go pleasing everyone, so screw it, I'm stepping out." I love that song and I love the message. So if we come to the point where we've become bored with our work or it feels like a chore or a job, then it may be time for us to try stepping out for a while and try something different. After 30 years of being a commercial artist, I still enjoy my creative passion and continue to take on small projects. But it took me to step out of the commercial design field and get a job in a totally different field to find the joy in my own art again. I burned out of the corporate grind, working in a cubicle every day and being told my artwork wasn't what somebody else was thinking of. Despite following the marketing direction down to the finest detail, all it took was one person to change everything on a whim, deciding that they preferred the color blue now instead of yellow like they originally wanted. Months of meetings and brainstorming and all that hard work was scrapped and my team had to start all over from scratch. I love graphic design, but I didn't love managing people and projects that left me feeling undervalued and that my creative spirit was suffocating. I also resented the idea of spending ridiculous amounts of time working on a project only to feel jealousy when our department head got all the praise and accolades. I remember days feeling where my motivation would sink and I felt unhealthy sitting under those bright fluorescent lights for 10 hours a day. But for me, I eventually realized that for my routine to change, I had to change my routine. The corporate art world is not a place to expect people to be sympathetic or supportive. In corporate design, no company or agency has ever put a designer's needs ahead of the company's. With social media, no one has ever said, "I just love working for an algorithm." And even with students, they'll never encourage you to take a break from their demands and needs to just go for a walk outside in the sun. For me, when I'm at work, driving in my car, or out with friends, the thought of being home in my little studio to paint or draw just makes me giddy with excitement. Thinking about my art supplies raises my pulse, and the idea of being creative makes me smile inside and out and feel really happy. And that is the entire point of this video. If you're not feeling excited about your work, your supplies, your process, or your whole creative routine, then it may be time for a change. If creating art for yourself feels more like a job, well, then it's probably not much fun to think about either, and again, it may be time for a change. So my hope is that with this long drawn-out discussion, that it was helpful and may provide some motivation to help keep a fresh perspective on our art and our creative spirit. Whether we're creating art for ourselves, to hang in a gallery, to post online, or to make content for others, it is vital that the experience should fill our hearts with joy, even if we fail or make mistakes, because that is going to happen. It's supposed to happen. It's how we learn, understand, grow, and have fun. Well, I'm so grateful for your time watching, and if you made it through this whole video, I thank you so much for your time today. If you haven't subscribed, please do, and I'll bring you more content to get you thinking. If you have thoughts on this video, please share your comments down below, and I'd love to discuss your experiences. I hope you're having fun with your creativity and nurturing your creative spirit. Thank you again for coming by. Stay healthy, and as always, God bless.